The moment Taylor sees a cat, everything else disappears. There are certain things Taylor Swift can usually do without losing focus. She can walk into a stadium filled with tens of thousands of screaming fans and somehow command the entire room. She can perform for hours under enormous pressure. She can step onto a red carpet knowing that millions of people are watching her every move. But there is one thing that can still completely derail Taylor Swift. A cat. Not a microphone. Not a camera. Not even a massive crowd. A cat. The second Taylor spots one, the superstar disappears and the cat lover takes over. And that might sound like an exaggeration, until you actually watch some of these moments. Because Taylor doesn't simply notice cats. She investigates them. She talks to them. She compliments them. She tries to make friends with them. She interrupts whatever she is doing to give them attention. And sometimes, she behaves as though the cat has been waiting all day specifically for her arrival. That's what makes Taylor's relationship with animals so entertaining. Behind the polished performances, the stadium tours, the awards, the headlines, and the seemingly endless spotlight, there is this completely different side of Taylor, the woman who can become genuinely distracted because a tiny kitten walked into the room. And if you have ever wondered just how serious Taylor's cat obsession really is, the answer is simple: very serious. But there's more to the story than Taylor being a famous cat person. Because over the years, her pets have become part of her public story. They have appeared in music videos. They have appeared in commercials. They have appeared on television. They have traveled through different eras of Taylor's career. And some of them have even become celebrities in their own right. So today, we're going through some of Taylor Swift's funniest, sweetest, strangest, and most unforgettable moments with cats and dogs. And trust me, there are moments here that perfectly explain why Swifties have always found Taylor's relationship with animals so fascinating. If you love following the little details that make Taylor's story feel human, not just the stadium shows and giant headlines, subscribe to Taylor Timeline. Because sometimes the most revealing moments in Taylor's life aren't the ones happening on a stage. Sometimes they're happening next to a cat. And the first example may be the perfect proof. Taylor's cat radar is unbelievable. Imagine Taylor is in the middle of a professional production. There are cameras, crew members, lighting, music, schedules, people waiting for the next shot. Everyone knows exactly what they are supposed to be doing. And then Taylor notices a cat. Suddenly, the production has a new priority: the cat. This is one of the funniest patterns that has followed Taylor throughout her career. She seems to have an almost unbelievable ability to notice cats wherever she goes. And once she sees one, it becomes very difficult for her to pretend she hasn't. One of the cutest examples happened during a video shoot when Taylor became distracted by a kitten. The production may have had a schedule. The camera may have been ready. But Taylor had discovered something far more important: a tiny cat. And she couldn't resist. She stopped to interact with it, admire it, and eventually show it off. The kitten's eyes caught her attention immediately. She couldn't stop talking about how beautiful they were. And then came the detail that made the moment even more special. The kitten had apparently become Taylor's new furry friend. Taylor was fascinated by how loudly the kitten was purring. She wanted other people to hold it. She wanted everyone around her to appreciate it. For a few moments, the music video wasn't the most interesting thing happening on set. The cat was. And honestly, that tells you a lot about Taylor. Because fame can make ordinary experiences feel very different. A celebrity surrounded by cameras could easily walk past an animal and keep moving. Taylor seems to have the opposite instinct. She stops. She looks. She connects. She wants to say hello. And this happens again and again. Taylor can be introduced to a cat for only a few seconds and immediately start talking to it as though they've known each other for years. She's perfect. Can I say hello? What do you think? These aren't calculated celebrity moments. At least, they don't come across that way. They feel spontaneous. And that's probably why fans love them. Because the Taylor Swift who is standing on stage in front of thousands of people can feel larger than life. But the Taylor Swift who sees a tiny kitten and immediately wants to pick it up? That Taylor feels incredibly relatable. Of course, there is another reason these moments became so memorable. Taylor already had 2 cats waiting for her at home. And those two cats couldn't have been more different. Meet Meredith and Olivia. If you know Taylor Swift, you probably know the names Meredith Grey and Olivia Benson. And if you know Taylor's cats, you also know that they have personalities that seem almost completely opposite. Taylor has often portrayed Olivia as the sweeter, more affectionate one. Meredith, meanwhile, has developed a reputation for being a little more selective. And that contrast became one of the funniest recurring themes surrounding Taylor's pets. Taylor can adore both cats equally while still acknowledging that they don't exactly behave the same way. One seems happy to receive attention. The other sometimes seems to be wondering why Taylor is interrupting her day. And that dynamic has created some unforgettable moments. Taylor has talked to her cats like they're members of the family. She has greeted them when she gets home. She has asked where the other cat is. She has tried to get their attention. And sometimes she appears to expect an actual response. Of course, cats have their own rules. They don't care that you're a global superstar. They don't care that you've won awards. They don't care that millions of people know your name. If they want to ignore you, they're going to ignore you. And perhaps that's exactly why Taylor loves them so much. Cats don't seem particularly impressed by celebrity status. They don't ask for an autograph. They don't scream when Taylor walks into the room. They don't care about a new album release. They simply exist on their own terms. And Meredith, in particular, has sometimes seemed perfectly comfortable reminding Taylor of that. One of the funniest examples came during Taylor's promotion for the ACM Awards in 2018. Taylor had a very important message to deliver. She needed to encourage fans to vote. So naturally, she decided to explain the entire process to Meredith. Yes. Her cat. Taylor carefully explained that the ACM Awards were fan-voted and that she had been nominated for Entertainer of the Year. She explained that fans could vote every day. She explained why the nomination was exciting. And she continued talking as if Meredith were sitting there taking notes. Then Taylor asked the cat whether people should go vote. Meredith made a tiny sound. Taylor immediately treated it like an answer. Problem solved. Meredith had apparently approved the campaign. And Taylor concluded the conversation as though they had just finished an important business meeting. Good talk. That moment is hilarious because it perfectly captures the strange relationship Taylor seems to have with her pets. She doesn't merely own them. She interacts with them. She gives them personalities. She imagines what they're thinking. And sometimes, she seems convinced they're actually participating in her life decisions. Which brings us to one of the most entertaining ideas Taylor has ever played with. What if her cats could actually talk? If Taylor's cats could talk, they would roaster. Taylor has joked about what her cats might say if they could speak. And somehow, the imagined conversations are even funnier because Taylor doesn't imagine them as cute little cartoon characters. She imagines them as sophisticated critics. People who are constantly judging her. People who are tired of being treated like children. In one hilarious imagined exchange, the cats essentially remind Taylor, they're not children. They're cats. And they're sophisticated. That distinction matters. Because from Taylor's perspective, she might be the loving cat mom. But from the cat's imagined perspective, she's the roommate who keeps interrupting their naps. She's the human who plays music when they're trying to relax. She's the person who buys things they didn't ask for. She's the person who insists on talking to them when they're clearly busy doing absolutely nothing. And honestly, that is exactly how many cat owners understand the relationship. You think you own the cat. The cat thinks you work for them. Taylor has also joked about setting up entertainment for her cats so they wouldn't get bored. And the imagined response from the cats is essentially, we're cats. We'll be fine. That contrast makes these moments so funny. Taylor is a superstar with a schedule that is almost impossible to comprehend. Yet at home, she can apparently spend time worrying about whether her cats are entertained enough. And then there is the most relatable part of all. Cats sleep. A lot. But Taylor has occasionally been unable to resist bothering Meredith anyway. There are moments where Meredith is simply lying down, completely peaceful, while Taylor is trying to make the bed around her. The cat refuses to move. Taylor tries to negotiate. Meredith doesn't care. Taylor suggests that the cat could move around her. Meredith appears to disagree. Eventually, it becomes clear that this isn't Taylor's house anymore. It's Meredith's house. Taylor simply lives there. And if you have ever shared a home with a cat, you already understand exactly what happened. But there is something even more interesting about Meredith and Olivia. They didn't just become Taylor's pets. They became recognizable parts of her public image. The cats who became part of Taylor's story during Taylor's 1989 era. She introduced fans to Meredith and Olivia in a way that made it clear these weren't just random pets. They were part of her world. Taylor spoke about them with affection and humor. She explained their names. She described their personalities. And fans quickly learned that the cats were going to be recurring characters in the Taylor Swift universe. Olivia Benson was named after the iconic detective character from Law and Order, Special Victims Unit, portrayed by Mariska Hargitay. Meredith Grey, meanwhile, was named after the famous character from Grey's Anatomy. Those names alone tell you something about Taylor's personality. She didn't just choose ordinary pet names. She connected her cats to fictional characters she loved. And then those names became globally recognizable. At Taylor's shows, fans would hear her talk about Meredith and Olivia. They would see pictures of them. They would hear stories about their behavior. Eventually, the cats became so recognizable that they could appear in entertainment stories without Taylor even being the main subject. That's a pretty unusual thing. Most celebrities have pets. Taylor's cats became part of pop culture. And there was one moment that took the Olivia Benson name to another level. Because eventually, Olivia Benson the cat met Olivia Benson the detective. When Olivia Benson met Olivia Benson, there is something wonderfully absurd about this moment. Taylor Swift had named her cat Olivia Benson after one of television's most recognizable detectives. Years later, she had the opportunity to bring the two Olivias together. Taylor met Mariska Hargitay, the actress who plays Detective Olivia Benson, multiple times. And eventually came the ultimate reunion. The famous detective. The famous cat. Same name. Completely different species. Taylor introduced the moment with obvious excitement. This was Olivia Benson meeting Olivia Benson. And somehow, it actually happened. One Olivia is a legendary fictional detective. The other is Taylor Swift's famous cat. And Taylor was standing in the middle of it all. It was one of those moments that feels almost too perfectly Taylor Swift. Because what other pop superstar could have a cat named after a television detective and then eventually arrange a meeting between the two? The moment was funny. It was sweet. And it was another reminder that Taylor's love of animals isn't something that only exists behind closed doors. She has allowed that part of her personality to become part of her public story. But perhaps the clearest evidence of just how committed Taylor is to being a cat person came when she actually went to cat school. Yes, cat school. And this might be one of the strangest celebrity moments of her career. Taylor Swift goes to cat school. Imagine being Taylor Swift. You've become one of the biggest recording artists in the world. You've performed in stadiums. You've released blockbuster albums. You've won major awards. You've spent years mastering the art of performance. And then one day, you're standing in a room with James Corden learning how to behave like a cat. That's exactly the kind of ridiculous situation that somehow feels completely natural when Taylor is involved. Taylor participated in a comedic cat school segment with James Corden. And she did not approach the assignment halfway. The class involved singing, movement, cat choreography, and, eventually, learning how to properly behave like a cat. There were instructions about subtle movements, a flick of the ear, the posture, the attitude, the meow. And then Taylor was asked to give her best meow. This was the moment when things could have gone one of two ways. Taylor could have laughed it off. Or she could have fully committed. She committed. And the entire situation became even funnier because Taylor seemed almost determined to prove that she understood cats better than everyone else in the room. Then came another challenge. Milk. Taylor was asked to drink milk from a bowl on the floor. And she immediately recognized the absurdity of the situation. After all, she had recently been named Artist of the Decade. But now she was crawling around drinking milk like a cat. It was completely ridiculous. And that's why it worked. Taylor has always been willing to make herself look silly when the moment calls for it. She didn't need to protect the image of the untouchable superstar. She could be goofy. She could commit to the joke. She could let the audience laugh with her. And in this case, she effectively earned an honorary degree in being a cat. But here's where the story gets interesting. For all the evidence that Taylor is a cat person, cats weren't actually her first furry love. Before Meredith, before Olivia, there was another animal who had a very special place in Taylor's life. A dog named Bug. Before Meredith and Olivia, there was Bug. Long before Taylor Swift became the global superstar the world knows today, she was a teenager with a dream. And during that period of her life, she had a dog named Bug. Taylor has spoken about getting Bug when she was 15 years old. The story of how Bug entered her life is especially meaningful because it happened during a completely different chapter of Taylor's journey. Taylor was in Los Angeles. She was young. Her career was still developing. She was nowhere near the level of fame she would eventually reach. And then she encountered a puppy. Taylor recalled being in a mall when someone approached her holding the little dog. The puppy immediately caught her attention. And before long, Bug became part of Taylor's life. What makes that story so special is what happened afterward. Taylor's career changed. Her music career grew. Her audience expanded. She went from a teenager chasing a dream to a global superstar. But Bug was there. Taylor described Bug as one of the first things she spent her songwriting money on. Think about what that means. At that point, Taylor's songwriting represented possibility. It represented the future. It represented the dream she was working toward. And one of the first things she chose to spend that money on was a little creature who would become part of her life. That's why Bug occupies such a different place in the story. Meredith and Olivia became famous cats. They became part of Taylor's public image. But Bug knew Taylor before the world really knew Taylor. Before stadiums. Before the biggest tours. Before the enormous headlines. Before Taylor Swift became a name recognized almost everywhere. Bug was there. And that makes the relationship especially touching. Because when a person grows up in public, there are very few things that remain connected to the person they were before the fame. A long-time pet can be one of those anchors. A familiar presence from a completely different chapter. And that's why Taylor's connection with animals has always felt deeper than simply saying, Taylor loves cats. There are animals connected to different eras of her life. Animals who knew different versions of her. Animals who were there before the cameras arrived. But while Bug represents Taylor's earlier life, another dog would provide a very different kind of challenge. Kitty. Taylor Swift versus her mom's dog. Taylor may understand cats. She may have mastered the art of talking to them. She may even be willing to attend cat school. But dealing with a mischievous dog? That's another story. While filming the Love Story music video, Taylor brought her mom's dog, Kitty, onto the set. The shoot itself was already demanding. Taylor described running up and down a staircase over and over while wearing a corset in the middle of summer. Temperatures were reportedly around the 90s. And there was Taylor, working through the conditions and filming the scene. But then there was Kitty. And Kitty apparently wasn't particularly interested in cooperating. Taylor tried to get the dog's attention. She called for her. She tried to manage the situation. Eventually, the frustration turned into a hilarious declaration. This is why I like cats. And honestly, that line might explain the entire Taylor Swift animal hierarchy. Cats can be difficult. But at least they tend to stay where they want to stay. Dogs can have a completely different energy. They want to move. They want attention. They can become distracted. They can turn a simple filming moment into complete chaos. And Kitty wasn't finished. Whenever Taylor visited her mom's house, Kitty still wanted attention. There were playful moments. There were treats. There was even some teasing involving whipped cream. Taylor would play with the dog and tease her with a treat while Kitty waited for her chance. And despite all the chaos, there was clearly affection there. Because that's the funny thing about pets. They don't have to be perfectly behaved to become part of the family. Sometimes the animals who cause the most trouble become the ones with the biggest personalities. And Taylor's relationship with Kitty was exactly that kind of relationship. But then came another reminder that, despite her enormous love of cats, Taylor absolutely has a soft spot for dogs too. The puppy that stopped Taylor mid-concert. Picture thousands of fans packed into a concert. The lights are on. The crowd is screaming. Taylor is performing in front of an enormous audience. And then, somewhere among the fans, there is a tiny puppy. Taylor notices. And suddenly, the puppy has Taylor's full attention. It didn't matter that there were thousands of people there. It didn't matter that Taylor was in the middle of a massive performance. She saw the puppy. And she wanted to say hello. The resulting moment was brief, but incredibly revealing. Taylor leaned down and gave the little dog a kiss. For a moment, the enormous concert environment disappeared. It was just Taylor and the puppy. And fans watching from around the venue could only react. Because there is something uniquely Taylor about a moment like that. Her career is built around enormous scale. Stadiums. Production. Thousands of people. Millions watching online. But her personality often seems to gravitate toward tiny, personal moments. A kitten. A puppy. A pet sitting quietly beside her. Those moments strip away the spectacle. And perhaps that's why fans remember them. Because the superstar Taylor Swift can feel almost impossible to comprehend. But the Taylor who stops to say hello to a puppy? That feels like someone you could actually know. And that same warmth appears in another important chapter of her life. Because now, there is another dog entering the broader story surrounding Taylor's world. A new furry member. More recently, reports and visual sightings have fueled curiosity about a fluffy white dog appearing alongside Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. The source story describes Travis being spotted arriving on Taylor's private jet in Miami with a small, fluffy dog that appeared to resemble a Samoyed. And this is where we need to separate what was observed from what was assumed. The sighting itself generated attention because fans naturally began asking questions. Whose dog is it? Is it Taylor's? Is it Travis's? Is it a family pet? Is this simply a dog belonging to someone traveling with them? And, most importantly, does it actually represent a new addition to their household? Those questions should remain questions unless Taylor or Travis confirms the details. But the reason fans were so interested is obvious. Taylor has a long history of making animals part of her life. She has had dogs. She has had famous cats. Her pets have appeared in major moments throughout her career. So the possibility of another furry companion naturally caught people's attention. And because Taylor and Travis have built such a high-profile relationship, even something as ordinary as traveling with a dog can become a major pop culture talking point. That is one of the strange realities of Taylor's life. For most people, bringing a dog along on a trip is just bringing a dog along. For Taylor Swift, people start analyzing the breed, the timing, the location, the travel arrangements, and what it might mean. And that's exactly why these little details matter. Not because every dog sighting contains some secret message, but because animals have consistently been part of Taylor's story. They have followed her through different chapters. And they have often provided something that fame cannot. Normalcy. Why Taylor's pets matter so much to fans at first glance. This entire story might seem like nothing more than a collection of cute animal moments. Taylor sees a cat. Taylor hugs a dog. Taylor talks to Meredith. Taylor meets another Olivia Benson. Taylor goes to cat school. Cute. Funny. End of story. But there is a reason these moments have lasted. They reveal a side of Taylor that doesn't require a stage. Think about the different versions of Taylor we've seen throughout her career. The teenage songwriter. The country newcomer. The pop superstar. The stadium performer. The record-breaking artist. The woman constantly surrounded by cameras. The celebrity whose every move can become a headline. But the pet moments give us something different. Taylor doesn't need to perform for a cat. She doesn't need to impress a kitten. She doesn't need to worry about whether a dog understands her career achievements. Animals don't care. And perhaps that's part of the appeal. They provide a world where Taylor can simply be Taylor. She can be silly. She can be affectionate. She can get distracted. She can talk nonsense. She can make jokes. She can obsess over a kitten. She can lose an argument with a cat. And no matter how famous she becomes, the animal isn't impressed. Meredith isn't going to suddenly become more cooperative because Taylor won another award. Olivia isn't going to care about a #1 album. A puppy doesn't know what a stadium tour is. Animals exist outside the machinery of celebrity, and that makes Taylor's interactions with them feel unusually genuine. For Swifties, these moments can also feel like little windows into different eras of Taylor's life. Bug belongs to a younger Taylor. Meredith and Olivia became associated with the years when Taylor's pop career expanded. The animals around her have appeared during music videos, television appearances, tours, interviews, and countless personal moments. They're almost like furry markers on the timeline. And that is exactly what makes them so interesting for a channel like Taylor Timeline. Because Taylor's story isn't only told through albums and awards. Sometimes it's told through the animals sitting beside her. The cat mom who never really turned it off. There's another reason Taylor's cat moments are so entertaining. She doesn't seem capable of simply saying, "That's a cute cat." She has to investigate. She has to compliment the cat. She has to ask questions. She has to create an entire conversation. One moment she's looking at a kitten's eyes. The next, she's imagining the animal as a unicorn. Then a Pegasus. Then a magical creature. Then suddenly she's asking whether the cat wants to write songs. It's completely ridiculous. And it's also incredibly endearing. Because Taylor's imagination has always been one of the defining parts of her personality. It's what helped her turn ordinary emotions into songs. It's what allowed her to create characters, stories, worlds, and entire musical eras. So when that imagination is directed toward her pets, you get these wonderfully strange moments. The cat isn't just a cat. The cat is a magical creature. The cat is a roommate. The cat is a critic. The cat is a business partner. The cat is possibly an unwilling participant in an awards campaign. And, occasionally, the cat is apparently Taylor's boss. That's what makes the relationship so funny. Taylor might be one of the most powerful entertainers in the world. But at home, she can still be the person trying to convince a cat to move off the bed. And the cat can still win. Every time. The biggest difference between Taylor and her cats. There is an almost perfect irony in Taylor Swift being obsessed with cats. Taylor's career has been defined by control. She plans. She writes. She performs. She builds eras. She creates elaborate visual worlds. She pays attention to details. She knows how she wants a story told. But cats. Cats don't care about your plans. Cats operate on their own schedule. They decide when they want attention. They decide when they want to sleep. They decide when they want to leave. They decide whether they want to cooperate. And Taylor has to accept that. Maybe that's part of why the relationship works. Because for someone whose professional life is constantly being analyzed and managed, a cat offers a completely different reality. You can't schedule a cat's affection. You can't command it. You can't force it. You just have to wait. And when the cat finally decides to sit beside you, that's the reward. The same thing applies to dogs in a different way. Dogs can bring chaos, excitement, affection, and unpredictability. They can interrupt the perfect plan. They can turn a serious filming environment into a comedy scene. And Taylor seems to embrace that too. These animals don't make her life more polished. They make it more unpredictable. And perhaps that's exactly what makes them so valuable. The little moments fans never forget years from now. Fans will remember Taylor's biggest concerts. They'll remember record-breaking albums. They'll remember major award victories. They'll remember iconic outfits. They'll remember career-changing performances. But alongside those giant moments, there will also be these tiny memories. Taylor talking to Meredith like she's an employee. Taylor trying to convince a cat to cooperate. Taylor meeting Olivia Benson the detective with Olivia Benson the cat. Taylor drinking milk from a bowl during cat school. Taylor stopping to kiss a puppy during a concert. Taylor talking about Bug, the dog who entered her life when she was still a teenager. Taylor struggling with Kitty on the Love Story set. And perhaps most importantly, Taylor simply being happy around animals. These moments don't break records. They don't top charts. They don't require a giant stage. But they reveal something important. They show the person behind the superstar. And maybe that's why fans connect with them so strongly. Because Taylor Swift's life can sometimes seem impossibly large. Her career has reached a level where even the smallest details can become international news. But animals don't see the celebrity. They see the human. And when Taylor is around them, we often get a glimpse of that human too. So, is Taylor really a cat person? At this point, the evidence is overwhelming. Taylor loves cats. She has repeatedly talked about them. She has built relationships with them. She has incorporated them into her public life. She has joked about their personalities. She has named them after beloved television characters. She has brought them into entertainment moments. And she has demonstrated a level of enthusiasm around random cats that most people simply cannot fake. But does that mean Taylor doesn't love dogs? Absolutely not. Bug was incredibly important to her. Kitty was part of her family environment. She has stopped to greet puppies. And recent sightings involving a fluffy dog have once again sparked interest among fans. So perhaps the more accurate answer is this: Taylor may have a special place in her heart for cats, but she clearly has a soft spot for animals in general. And that might be the real story. Because the cutest thing about Taylor's relationship with pets isn't whether she chooses cats over dogs. It's the way her personality changes when she's around them. The superstar becomes playful. The serious performer becomes silly. The celebrity becomes a pet owner arguing with an animal that doesn't care who she is. And for a few minutes, the enormous world surrounding Taylor Swift disappears. There's just Taylor. And a cat. Or a dog. And honestly, that's probably one of the most relatable things about her. The final thought: Taylor Swift's career has taken her through more eras than most artists could ever imagine. She's grown up in front of the world. She's changed genres. She's rewritten the rules of modern pop stardom. She's performed for millions. She's created music that became part of people's lives. And through all of those transformations, there have been smaller constants. Family, friends, music, and, of course, animals. Bug belonged to a younger Taylor who was still figuring out what her future might look like. Meredith and Olivia became part of the Taylor Swift story as that future grew bigger and bigger. They were there for different chapters. They appeared alongside different versions of Taylor. They became familiar faces to fans who never expected to become emotionally invested in celebrity cats. And that's the strange magic of it. Taylor's animals don't just exist in the background. They remind us that behind every enormous career is still a person who comes home, sits down, talks to a cat, gets ignored, tries again, and probably loses. Because no matter how famous you become, cats don't care about your resume. They don't care about your awards. They don't care about your streaming numbers. They don't care about your sold-out stadiums. They care about whether you have food, whether you are disturbing their nap, and whether you have finally understood that they are, in fact, in charge. And maybe that's why Taylor's funniest pet moments are so memorable. They're not really about celebrity. They're about affection. They're about companionship. They're about the little pieces of normal life that survive even when everything else becomes enormous. So yes, Taylor Swift may be one of the biggest stars on the planet. But somewhere in the middle of all that fame, there's still a woman who can completely forget what she's doing because she spotted a kitten. And honestly, Swifties probably wouldn't want it any other way. Because when you look back at Taylor's journey, the biggest moments aren't always the ones with the loudest applause. Sometimes they're the quiet, ridiculous, unexpectedly sweet moments that remind us who she is when nobody needs her to be a superstar. And whether the next chapter brings another album, another era, another stadium, or simply another animal stealing the spotlight, one thing feels almost certain. If Taylor sees a cat nearby, the schedule can wait. The cat comes first. And that may be the most Taylor Swift thing of all. This is Taylor Timeline, where we don't just follow the headlines, we follow the little moments that make Taylor's story unforgettable. If you're a Swiftie who loves discovering those hidden, funny, emotional, and completely unexpected pieces of Taylor's journey, make sure you're subscribed. Because there will always be another era, another story, another unforgettable moment, and, apparently, another cat.